Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm really stoked to be able to continue my readings of Wurmbrand and his The Answer to the Atheistic Handbook. I'm going to read two chapters this morning, and I kind of have missed the last two ones. I've been kind of busy or out of town, so I'm trying to get through this book before I get back to my Saturday blazing with Bo and Blaise Pascal time, which is going to be really cool. I've been reading some great stuff by Blaise. Um, and This chapter is called Does Christianity Teach Servility Towards Tyrannical Authorities? And so let me just go through this real quick, just so you know. Servility is an excessive willingness to serve or please others. So, does Christianity teach as servility towards tyrannical authorities? So, this is again Wurmbrand's rebuttal to the atheistic handbook that from the Moscow's Academy of Science in 1961, whom he was imprisoned for some 11 or so years, 12 years. And, the reason why I like going through this again is that, just so you know, there's a lot of persecution that takes place today, religious persecution. So sometimes when we are talking about human rights, sometimes we can forget actually that there's a lot of issues in our world. I was reading earlier this year, roughly 350 Nigerian Christians were killed at the hands of Islamic radicals. That's earlier this year. By June, the total was over 1,200 murdered for their faith. So you can check out Voice of the Martyrs and you can look at that. At this rate, 2,400 innocent Christians, including children, will be slaughtered. And it's just a radical idea. So a sad thing of our world today, and it's always been in our world. So, when you think about human rights and being, injustices, I hope you not just think of stuff in our states, but you also think of things all over the world. So, does Christianity teach servility towards tyrannical authorities? So it says the words of Jesus, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, are proof enough for the authors of the Atheist Handbook that he taught servility towards those, or towards what we would call today a colonial ruler. Now, first of all, Jesus never said these words to his disciples. He said them to his worst adversaries, the Pharisees. Their whole lives were a mockery of religion. So he told them, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar, and to God the things that are God's. He was sure that by striving to do so, his opponents would soon find out that if they were complacent towards mad rulers, many Roman Caesars were mad, there would be nothing left to give to God. The disciples of Jesus must have understood well that he meant what he meant by these words, which have been so often misused. I love that sentence where he says he was sure that by striving to do so, meaning render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's and to God the things that are God's, his opponents, the Pharisees, would soon find out that if they were complacent towards mad rulers, many of the Roman Caesars were mad, then there would be nothing left to give to God. If somebody had been dishonest and wishes to make things right with those he has defrauded, he first has to establish as best as he can what he owes and then pay it back. Now, what did a Jew owe to Caesar? What does a Christian owe to a godless ruler? Nothing. Even in Rome, nothing belonged rightfully to Caesar. Julius Caesar, a victorious Roman general, upon his return from a campaign in Gallia, overthrew the republic by military force. He was thus not a legitimate ruler. He was succeeded by tyrants, most of them more fit for an asylum than a throne. These tyrants robbed the population of the Roman Empire of its freedom. They gave nothing to it. Even less did anything in Palestine belong to Caesar. Profiting from a division between Jewish factions, Gaius Pompeius, occupied by force this small country and imposed upon it a regime of terror and corruption. Caesar never constructed a road in Palestine. The Jews did the work. He did not build a house. He did not plant a tree. Render to Caesar what is Caesar's is a revolutionary patriotic sentence which in essence denies any right to the usurper. If any honest thinking citizen in the Soviet Union had been told during the Nazi invasion, give to Hitler what is Hitler's and to God what is God's, he would have understood those words as meaning, give Hitler the boot and throw his troops out, because nothing belongs to him in the Soviet Union. He had no right even to be there. The same would apply to past Soviet invasions in neighboring countries. The Roman authorities and the Jewish high priest, who were their stooges, eventually gave to the words of Jesus my interpretation. The proof is that they did not consider him a loyal citizen of the empire, but a rebel, and they crucified him. Critics simply misrepresent the truth when they portray the authorities of the New Testament as flatterers of the Roman authorities. It contains no accusation against the Roman governor. They say, all the guilt of the crucifixion is attributed to the Jews, while Pilate is described as a passive observer. It is easy to make such assertions in a country where Bibles are scarce. In Acts 4:27 we read, for truly against your holy servant Jesus, whom you anointed, both Herod and Pontius Pilate, with the Gentiles and the people of Israel were gathered together, a Jewish mob, incited by priests, had asked for the crucifixion of Jesus, but Pilate on his own initiative added cruelty to cruelty. We know it from the words, then Pilate took Jesus and scourged him. The text implies the utter debasement of a Roman governor who finds pleasure in personally whipping a prisoner about whose innocence he is obviously convinced. Then the Gospel says very clearly that Pilate delivered him to be crucified. John is not the only one to accuse the Roman governor. All the evangelists reveal him as a henchman. Matthew writes, when Pilate had scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified. Mark writes, Pilate delivered Jesus, and after he had scourged him to be crucified. Luke quotes Pilate explicitly, saying, I have found no fault in this man, I will therefore chastise him. The authors of the New Testament never whitewashed the Romans for their part in the crucifixion of Jesus. They share in the guilt. Later church historians are reported with fidelity how Roman authorities threw Christians to the wild beast and subjected them to all kinds of atrocities. Far from being servile as accused, true Christians in all ages have never recognized tyrants as their legitimate rulers, neither did they consider it a duty to be submissive to them. The first book against Christianity of which we have any knowledge is The True Word by Celsus. It is dated around AD 175. It reproaches Christians for not defending the emperor, fighting for him, participating in his military expeditions, or working. Christians should look upon evil leaders as oppressors. They will get no flattery from the disciples of Christ. Skeptics and even ignorant Christians quote another scripture to show that Christians teach blind submission to unjust rulers and is therefore a hindrance to the progress of humanity. The text is Romans 13:1-3. Let every soul be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and authorities that exist are appointed by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authority resists the ordinance of God, and those who resist will bring judgment on themselves. But this same chapter defines what a Christian means by the authority to whom he owes obedience. Only he deserves this name who, as the minister of God, gives praise to those who do good and executes wrath on him who does evil. If a ruler does the contrary, if he punishes good and rewards evil, we can no longer recognize his power as being from God. Bible verses such as the foregoing made Christians resist tyranny. In the Middle Ages, Savonarola was burned at the stake because he had said, quote, "Nothing is more abhorrent to a tyrant than service to Christ and a virtuous Christian life, for these are diametrically opposed to his own habits," unquote. I quote from a discussion between Queen Mary of Scots and the Protestant reformer John Knox. Mary, we have taught the people to receive another religion than their princes can allow. And how can that doctrine be of God, seeing that God commands subjects to obey their princes? Question mark. Knox, Madam, as right religion neither took original strength nor authority from worldly princes, but from the eternal God alone, so are not subjects bound to fame their religion according to the appetites of their princes? If all the seed of Abraham should have been of the religion of Pharaoh, what religion would have been in the world? Or if all the men in the days of the apostles should have been of the religion of the Roman emperors, what religion could there have been on the face of the earth? Mary, yes, but none of these men raised the sword against their princes. Knox, yet, madam, ye cannot deny but that they resisted, for these that obey not, in some sort, resist. Mary, but yet they resisted not by the sword. Knox, God, madam, had not given them the power and the means. Mary, think that ye subjects, having power, may resist their princes? Knox, if their princes exceed their bounds, madam, it is no doubt but they may be resisted, even by power. For what if a father should go mad and try to kill his own children? Should they not seize him and take the sword or weapons from him by force? It is even so, madam, the princes that would murder the children of God that are subject unto them. Their blind zeal is nothing but a very mad frenzy, and therefore to take the sword from them, to bind their hands and cast them in prison till they be brought to a more sober mind, is no disobedience against princes, but just obedience, because that it agreeth with the will of God. The Bible inspired Lincoln and Wilberforce to fight for the abolition of slavery. Marx, in his Das Kapital, acknowledges the role of the Christian Shaftesbury in introducing laws protecting labor in the United Kingdom. It was a Russian Christian, Count Leo Tolstoy, who denied any authority to the Tsar. Thomas Jefferson, President of the United States, wrote, quote, "I have sworn upon the altar of God eternal hostility against every form of tyranny, even or over the mind of man," unquote, and rebellion against tyrants is obedience towards God. Emerson wrote, "If you put a chain around the neck of a slave, the other fastens itself around your own." Lincoln wrote, "If slavery is not wrong, nothing is wrong." In his message to the Congress on December 1st, 1862, he said, "In giving freedom to the slaves, we give freedom to the free." But all these arguments are not really necessary because, as usual, the Atheist Handbook contradicts itself. In order to explain the miraculous growth and victory of Christianity, the atheist who cannot admit that God was working in the church claimed that it proselyted mostly slaves, quote, because slaves gained in Christian circles a position which they could not enjoy with others, unquote. In the epistle to Philemon, Paul urges a slave owner to receive back one of his servants who had fled, not only without punishment, but, quote, as a beloved brother, unquote. This was the spirit of primitive Christianity. Why then did the first Christians not abolish slavery? They were persecuted. They had no power in the state. Many of them were slaves themselves. Only a short time before, the great revolt of slaves led by Spartacus had been bloodily suppressed and many tens of thousands of slaves crucified. Only fools rebel when the sure outcome of rebellion is defeat. God had appeared only once on Mount Sinai giving the Ten Commandments. The preamble to them is this, quote, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage, unquote. In introducing himself to his people, he chooses to characterize himself as the liberator of slaves rather as the creator of heaven and earth. That is our God. It was in jail under Stalin and under his successors. I was in jail under Stalin and under his successors. Would the underground church of Russia not have more right than the atheists who speak about opposing tyranny? True Christians have been and are fighting for freedoms. In this matter, we have nothing to learn from our atheistic friends. The United States, Great Britain, and Australia do not have slave labor camps, but the Soviet Union did, and China, Vietnam, and other countries still do today. That's in the day he's writing this. To describe Christians as a bunch of sycophants to tyrants is only to caricature them. What atheists reject, therefore, is not Christianity, but a travesty of it. So Christians are not a bunch of self-seekers to tyrants. That's what he's getting at. So he sees that he takes a couple passages, and I like that one that he talks about, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's. And I like how he says, how he puts it, that it wasn't a positive thing that what Jesus was saying. It was actually quite contrary to that. He uses the example of Hitler. He says, if someone says to Hitler, or someone during the days of Hitler, give to Hitler what is Hitler's and to God what is God's, he would have understood those words as meaning give Hitler the boot and throw his troops out, because nothing belongs to him in the Soviet Union. He has no right even to be there. The same would apply to past Soviet invasions. That was kind of neat. So he brings up that passage, render to Caesar all things that are Caesar's. And that, I guess, is something that the Atheistic Handbook brings up, saying that Christianity does teach servility towards tyrannical authorities. And he's saying that's not what Jesus was getting at all when he was saying that. He wasn't saying, hey, just lay down. And he also goes over a little bit of Romans chapter 13, 1 through 3, that if the government is not obeying the doing the right, that we are not to submit to the wrongs that they want us to do. So we can also see that in the book of Acts. I'm just going through that chapter 4, where the apostles actually tell the authorities, the religious authorities of his day, no. So when the authorities tell them to do something, they say no to it, because they're not wanting the good, but the authorities are wanting the evil. And you see them moving away, saying no to that. So he kind of does his rebuttal on that issue of Christianity is not laying down towards tyrannical authorities, that we should actually be very, very well aware of what's going on with leadership and want to move away from tyrannical leaders. So, in Christianity, we have to be really sensitive, because sometimes we can trust in someone who's in leadership, and maybe it's not the right person to trust. So we need, in a sense, Christianity, it says test all things. So we are to test things. And so this next chapter is called A Heavenly or a Earthly Paradise. The Atheist Handbook quotes Frederick Engels as saying that Christianity's hope is in heaven and eternal life after death. According to him, Christianity does not have the will to carry out a social transformation in the world. This is pure fiction. It is not true that Christianity has only a heavenly goal. Jesus taught us to pray, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. In John 3:12, he reminds us, I told you earthly things. In the very beginning of the Gospel of Luke, we are told that when people asked John the Baptist what to do, he did not answer. Quote, strive for eternal life, unquote. The Baptist's answers were very earthly. Quote, he who has 2 tunics, let him give to him who has none, and he who has food, let him do likewise. Unquote. To tax collectors, he said, quote, collect no more than what is appointed for you, unquote. And to soldiers, did he not say, quote, seek heaven, but rather do not intimidate anyone or accuse falsely, and be content with your wages, unquote, which were higher than those of the average population. Jesus drove merchants out of the temple with a whip. He publicly accused scribes and Pharisees of devouring widows' houses. To a rich young man, he said, if you want to be perfect, go sell what you have and give to the poor. Christianity has in its program a social transformation in this world too. The main teaching of the gospel is that a Christian must follow the example of Christ. Was Christ himself passive towards injustice? How did the merchants driven out with a whip feel about his attitude? Was it passive resistance when he confronted the priests and Pharisees in their own temple, calling them vipers and hypocrites? Wisdom taught the disciples of Christ to be passive and meek in situations of Christian witness. However, when tyranny was threatened, Christians have justly responded to the call. When the peasants rebelled against the landlords in the time of the Reformation, the principal argument in favor of the cause were religious. Their revolutionary hymns were when Adam delved in Eve's span, who was then the gentleman, and the mighty fortress is our God, a bulwark never failing. When the movement of the industrial proletariat started in Britain, the song of the Chartist was Britannia's song, through slaves you be, God your creator made you free. To all he life and freedom gave, but never, never made a slave. The first to organize the demonstration that led to the revolution of the 1905 in Russia were not the communists, but Christian workers under the leadership of priest Gapon. The communists profited from it and later hanged the priests. Christianity is as revolutionary as was communism, but our revolutions differ. Communist revolutions were always negative and destructive. We Christians are revolutionary in an entirely different sense. Christians use first and foremost the sword of the Spirit, which can kill sin without killing the sinner. By the sword of the Spirit, Christians have corrected many abuses. Where Christian civilization reigns, men are free even to be atheist. I defy my honored opponents to give me the name of a single man who is in prison in the United States, Great Britain, or West Germany for being an atheist. But in former communist countries, millions of my brothers and sisters in faith have passed through jails or have been killed. Who has fought for freedom and obtained it, atheists or Christians? Christians do not exclude the necessity of rebellion against tyranny. When oppressors by their when oppressors by their excesses force them to rebel, and the circumstances are favorable, their aim is always to replace tyranny with a regime favoring peace and justice. Whereas Marx advocated, quote, permanent revolution, unquote, an expression he created. Permanent revolution for what? Revolution for revolution's sake? Never a goal to be reached? Never seen? Never even a utopia to aim for? This is sheer sadism. Christians never forget that the first rebel was the devil. They do not resort to rebellion easily, but even to rebellion against the communist regime, not even to rebellion against the communist regime. But they are interested in earthly destinies, only that they have more than earthly aims. Men are like frogs living at the bottom of some dark well from which they can see nothing of the outside world. Believers are men who, while living in such conditions, have heard the singing of a skylark, and miracle of miracles, they have understood the song. It speaks about sun and moon and stars and tree-covered mountains and hills and a wonderful sea. They have faith in the song. They have the assurance that there exists a heavenly paradise. Without neglecting their earthly duties, they strive towards it and call others to join them. The Christian believes in the new birth. He believes that a frog can become a lark, that human beings can become a partaker of the divine nature, and this is not by a long process, but instantly by faith in Jesus Christ. Believing all this, Christians fight for justice in the world while striving after the heavenly paradise. So cool. That was his little rebuttal on kind of, are Christians useless in this world, or do they really battle for rights and human rights and that kind of thing. So he goes through some history of that. A lot of even he talks about the Russian communist movement actually started through rebellion of Christians from tyranny. And so another interesting write-up as well. So so basically Christianity is not opposed to moving away from tyranny. It actually is for it in every way. So anyway, cool articles for sure. Cool chapters by him. The next one we're going to get into is called "Is There a God?" and we'll do that next time, and that'll be a fun chat too by Mr. Wurmbrand. Again, you could go to Voice of the Martyrs and check out the work there that they do on what's going on worldwide with religious freedoms, and specifically Christian, what's happening in Christianity. So you guys have a great one. Bye-bye.